Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a moment and walk you through the application itself as a getting started for the game. So not for the database, that's a different video. This is for the game. And the game technology is called Blazor, Blazor. And so I'm typing it into a browser up here. So it is called Blazor and Blazor. And so you can go here to Blazor, build client web apps, right? And there is so much information here. It's crazy. It should really help you get started. What it is, how to get started, and just tutorial after tutorial. It is a really vibrant community, and so really nice way to kind of get started here. So let me show you what it's like, though, because it'll be interesting. It is, and I want you to pay attention specifically to this game project. So the logic, by the way, is a class library. That's all that it is. It's not the game. The game will use logic, and you can see that in the dependencies, projects, there's logic. And so that points to it already. That means every time you build this, it is basically embedded inside of the game. .NET uses a concept of DLL, Dynamic Link Library, where you can drop a file inside a folder and it dynamically links it to the application. So really powerful. All right, so that's what that is. The API is going to be another video we talk about. This is where the machine learning piece of the project is going to go. And so you can just ignore that for now. Just know that it is an Azure function, right? You can kind of see it in the project file, what's going on there. But we don't have to pay any attention to that right now. It just sits here because it's also in C#. The reason I see this in the Solution Explorer whenever I click on the Explorer tab here is because I have Solution Explorer and, well, let me just jump to the list of things that I have installed. Nope, wrong list. Where is that list of things that I have installed? Right here. Okay, I have Visual Studio Code installed. I also have the C# dev kit. That's the reason that it works, right? So go ahead down here to the little boxes and install the C# dev kit. It'll ask you to log in. You can log in with the same GitHub account that you used to create your GitHub Copilot, right? So everybody should have their GitHub account by now. Of course, I know you all do. Hopefully, you've already had it approved as a student and you have Copilot. I think we saw how Copilot can help us in SQL, but now I'm going to show you in C#, right? And so hopefully you'll see some things that are pretty neat. All right, so let's go into the game so I can talk about everything inside this application and how it works. I want you to understand the folder structure in general. So let me begin with, yeah. All right, so let me begin at the top. It's not the top, but it's the most important, right? And so it is the program CS. This is everything that establishes the application. My guess is you're not going to have to make many changes here. It should already be here. There'll be a handful of things, perhaps. I don't know, but generally speaking, this will be just the boilerplate that you need. But I want you to know that program CS is the first thing that runs. It's the raw application itself. It's the host that executes and runs your Blazor application. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Inside www-root is everything that doesn't change. So for example, any CSS that you have, right, that doesn't execute. It just sits there and runs, or it sits there and provides information and is interpreted by the browser, and any file that you might have. So I've got a couple of files here, X and O, because we've got a game, right? So that's what www-root is. It's all of the static assets. And then in the layout, this is the overall layout of how everything is. This is basically the parent page for everything. And it's pretty powerful, but again, likely not where you're going to make very many changes. I just want you to know that this is why it's there. It's the shared layout across all the different pages. Inside the pages, well, no, let's go to properties. Inside properties is the launch settings that tells you how this is going to execute. So there are two profiles in the launch settings. And so where do profiles show up? They show up right here when I'm about to build. And so I can drop down and I can see that I can go to my Launch Blazor WebAssembly. And when I do, it is going to pick up the HTTPS, and you'll see it in just a second where these come from, or the HTTP profiles. And so that means we're going to use HTTPS, by the way. When it runs, it will automatically launch this is the URL, and so more specifically, this is the HTTPS URL. The reason there's both when you do this is because the HTTP URL is established so that it can automatically forward to HTTPS. That's because it is now industry standard that everybody uses HTTPS. So what you do is you provision HTTP and you automatically forward it over, right? So that's the way that it works. And so this is the URL that we'll be testing against as well. And then it launches the browser for you, and it's very nice. I want you just to know why it's there and how we know what the port number is, because I have changed the port number to be 1234 to make it nice and easy for us. All right, so back up to our files. All right, so that's with the launch setting. Just saying that when I'm launching this, and we're going to use HTTPS, and I'll show you in a sec, make sure that we are, use this port that we know of. Okay, that's launch settings. Again, something you will probably never change, but I don't want everything to be just a black box of mystery. The important things are almost certainly going to be in pages. This is where you create Razor pages. A Razor page, I'll open it up. A Razor page is like a combination of logic with or code with HTML, and specifically C# code. And you know that it's C# code because it starts with an @ sign. Everything else is just ordinary. So for example, if I came down here and I was like, let's create an H1 and call it Jerry, this is just HTML. It's totally fine. I can use Bootstrapper with this. I can make everything just straightforward and easy. That's really nice. That's not what we want to do long term, right? We want to make things dynamic. We wouldn't just say Jerry, but it's neat to know that I can just do this in HTML. Now, when I see this, I see that this H2, right, heading 2, has an @ sign and it has some logic in here, and it is going to show me something. In this case, it's going to show me the current user, like the next one that is going to play, X or Y. And then down here, I have this nice little div that is a layout for my tic-tac-toe. Right? So it's, you remember Ultimate Tic-Tac-Toe, what we're building. And then, so this is the game itself, the 9 tic-tac-toe boards, and then I have the individual tic-tac-toe boards. And you can see this little @ for each is a for each loop that allows me to create multiple boards. And so, like, where is the board? And so you can see all of the information about the game is down here in logic. And then I go up here and I can see, oh, I see what's going on. I am using the board, and it is a board index. This is a match to this board index class down here. Oh, okay, that's cool, right? This is a cell, so it's a cell index. This is the cell index, so then I can find the cell index. Oh, sorry, I said index when it's going to be cell info, right? So if I go to enums here, I can see that the cell index and the cell board both are just indicating the numeric value of which cell they belong to. Right, so it's going to take a minute to kind of go through and see, and maybe you'll write it a different way. I just wanted to give you a starting place of how it all would work. And then here's just some style to make it really nice. You may not do it this way in the end. You may decide you want to use Bootstrapper or whatever, and the UI team can decide what's going to happen. I just want to give you a starting place. Now, more importantly, when I go to Home Razor, which is where I am right now, and I can expand it, and there is a Home Razor CS. CS stands for C#. When I click that, that is a back-end file. We call this the code behind, and it is a partial class. That is because the Razor is a class itself. It is a class, and you know its name because only its file name is the only hint, right? It is home. And when you see up here, this is the path to get to it. So I would go to localhost colon 1234 / and nothing else, and I get to this file. If I were to change this to Jerry, right, then I would have to go to localhost / Jerry, and it would be, and that, well, that's the way it would work. And so now it says I'm using logic. That's a namespace, and that's the namespace down here. This is the one it's using. That's the reason I can use cell index and board index, because I'm bringing in this namespace, right? So it's a little bit like imports for a Python file. And so where does it get, for example, game? Where does game come from when I'm reading the next player, which is clearly a property of game? Well, it's in the code behind. And I could reference the code behind directly because this is creating a file called home, or I'm sorry, a class called home. And then when I go to the code behind, this is also creating a class right here called home. But more importantly, it's a partial class, which means it's in 2 different files. So that means this is the first half, this is the second half, and that's the reason they can reference each other so transparently. And so now I can say, all right, well, what can I do here? Well, I have a field called game, and that is the reason I can get the next player, because the next player is in the game info class. Make sense? It's okay. So this is when I start it up. I create a brand new game. This is a constructor. This is the onInitialize, which is part of Blazor, that says when the page loads for the first time, is there anything you want to do? And if I say, let's see, override onInitialized async, there are two initialized. One, if you do you want to do anything synchronously, or do you want to do anything asynchronously? It's just up to you if you want to. And you would have the word async right here if you're going to do it. You see the error because there is no asynchronous operation in there. If there were, I could say await task dot delay, right? I could just make it wait 100 milliseconds, which that doesn't make any sense at all. And but it's just an example of how I could make it asynchronous now, because task delay is an asynchronous operation that basically is a delay op for 100 milliseconds. This base is not required, right? This is to do anything that I need to do. And all right, so that exists. You're going to find that you're going to need to do some things at the very beginning. Now I can build methods and like this, and as I do, each of these methods are accessible to my HTML, right, my Razor file, because remember they're a shared class, and so, or a partial class, and so that means that everything I do here, I could just reference those. So I'm like, oh, I've got this really important operation. Well, I want that really important operation to call play. And so look at this. I have an a tag, right, with an href JavaScript that does nothing, right? This is just like a void, right? And so that, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but it just basically says, let's use an a tag, but let's not let the href do anything. And so this is how you get rid of that. But on the on click, you can see it's an on click, right? So now you're like, oh, okay, this is not just an on click. This is the on click. It's a C# operation inside HTML. And so when I click it, then I want to run this little method, right? You can see it's a Lambda method, but not that big of a deal. And I want to call play, and I want to pass into play both the board that is being played and the cell inside that board. Okay, that's neat. And I can get reference to those variables because they're up here that I'm looping through, right? So loop through all the boards, right? So this is a board index, so it's that it's number 1 through 9, but it's just it's just strongly typed, as a board index. So I have board index, board 1, board 2, board 3, board 4. And then for every board, I got to create 9 of those. And so here we go. Board 1, 2, or cell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. As I'm looping through those, I'll create the cell container. You can see it right there. And in it, I'll put in this click handler. And in that, I'll put the image of if it's an X, an O, or a blank. Right? So which one is it going to be? Here we go again. Inside the source of the image, I can say call a method called getCellImage and pass in the board and cell that I'm in and get the right one back. So let me jump to that and show you what I mean. By the way, the jump to that, I just put my cursor on it, hit F12. It jumped to where the method is on the code behind, and you can see it's just really simple, right? So I could say game.getBoard, passing in the board index, .getCell of that board, then passing in the cell index, and get the image name, and it's stored then in the class. Do you see how we're separating the logic? So the hard logic of the game is down here in the logic, and the interaction logic is up in the Razor page. And so it's super separated, and it makes it so that if I were trying to make the game, play a different way, that's fine. I could go into logic and do that. Meanwhile, I could let you make it look a different way. And we've separated our concerns enough that it should make it so that we can do our work independently, right? So that's really, really cool. Let me show you just some other things that you can do. I'm going to pull up Visual Studio for a moment just because it's tons faster for me to do a quick little demo. Just know you can also do this inside Visual Studio Code. And so I'm going to create a brand new project, and it is going to be delete me Cornell, right? This is so when I come back in, I know I can get rid of it. And I'm just going to create a quick little sample Blazor application so you can see what's going on. All right, so let me close this. And I know it's a different IDE, so you might be thrown off just a little, but look, structurally, it's the same, right? And so I'm going to go into components, pages, and it's got a couple of extras just because it's trying to do some nice stuff for me. And I'm going to show you what can be done here in Hello World. So let me go ahead and run it and make sure that my browser is sitting here so you can see it. And where's my browser that's running this? Oh, just open in another window here. All right, so there they go. So this is my code. You can see it's a hello world, and then here's hello world. So let's start by adding some code. Now, I know that I just showed you that I can add code in the code behind, but for demo's sake, I wanted to just show you that you can also add code in the Razor page directly just by saying code. It's that easy. And excuse me. But it's just like having the code behind. So I could create, for example, a variable here, int number equals 1. And then up here, instead of saying hello world, well, I'll just leave it and I'll just say at number. And so the at is telling me that this is going to be, oh, capital N. See, it's case sensitive. So the number is telling me, I'm sorry, the at is telling me this is part of the code, right? Which, so it goes down to here. And then I'm just referencing that field name, right? And so now I should be able to, let's see, let's rebuild it. It's actually nicer in Visual Studio Code because as you make changes, it updates the page itself. But I just want you to see, here's number 1. That's because I've defaulted it to 1. But watch this. If I look for my override on initialize, I could say number equals 2, right? And so now I can say let's see, Control Shift F5. Good. Control Shift F5. Good. Now it's a keystroke for me to restart it. And restart it in another window. All right, so now you can see it's 2, right? Because I'm using this value. But let me show you more. So let's say I have a Boolean value, and visible equals true, let's say for now. And I could go up here to hello world, and I could say at if visible, and then I'll just wrap it in curly brackets because curly braces are the way we do it inside C#. So now everything inside that if is going to be conditional to what the value is of visible. Make sense? All right, so let me restart this again. There we go. And now you can see it's still there, right? Hello World 2. That's what it's wrapped around, is Hello World 2. But what if I came down here and changed this to false? And now I say, let's run it again. And it's gone, right? It's gone. But let's try this. I'll say public void click. No, I'll say a toggle, we'll call it. Toggle. And in this, we'll say that visible equals not visible. So if it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes visible. If it's false, it becomes true. And so now I can create a button. And so let's see. Let me do this the way I hope you would do it. And so I would say create a button to call toggle, right? And now I should be able to wait for just a moment while Copilot gives me a little bit of a hand here. Let's see if I can cause it to occur. Well, a little window popped up on the other side. And I forget what the keystroke. It's funny because you switch between IDEs and each one has their own sort of keystroke. And it is Control Alt backslash, I think. Is that right? Let's see. That's funny. There it is. Open chat window, manage. I don't know what setting. How do I invoke it right now? It's funny going between all of these little tools. Let's just do it like this. No big deal. So the chat window can see my code, and then I can just talk to it like you do ChatGPT, right? Except for it's Copilot. Help with the button. Let's see if it's clever enough to help me with that. All right, so it is saying the syntax looks like this. And so I'll copy it, bring it down. And it's what we would have guessed, right? It's the on click. And oh, button, there we go. And it's the on click with the at, because we know that's the code side of the click. And then it's just calling toggle. And here it is right there. And that should make it so that visible becomes the opposite. Now here's why I'm showing you this. Not only how to call it, but let me delete this part. But because it'll also update the page for us as well, right? So pretty stinking neat when you see it. Let's see, Shift Control F5. All right. Now it pulls it back up, and you can see that it's not there, right? It's hidden. But if I say toggle visibility, now it's there. That's because it switched from false to true, and it is already wired up to the code, And just think about this from web development for a second. If you've done any web development before, you know this is a JavaScript operation, but it's not for you. It is a fully typed and safe, garbage collected, everything you want as far as a real procedural language that you can write against, right? And I mean, look at it. It's very similar to JavaScript, I suppose, because they're both based on C. Um, but the power is now. I also have access to logic, right? Logic. Oh well, this is my demo, but I could say logic dot, and I could get all of the operators or classes that are inside my logic class as well, right? So that's what I want to be able to do. Get a load of this. If I have, let's see, right here, let's just say span. You don't see spans used all that much anymore. And then style equals color. And then what if I said at color? Aha. Now I can go down here and I could say a string, not at, but just color equals blue. All right, so now the default color of welcome is going to be blue. And I'll prove that to you just by running it real quick. Right, that's really great. And now I want to change it so that if visible, then I want color equals red. Otherwise, else, I want color, color equals green. All right, no problem. So now I'll restart it again. And it should be, well, different in a different window. This little inconsistency is a lot of fun. But see, I haven't clicked toggle yet. So this logic hasn't run. You see, it's just the default. So the first time I click it, right, it swaps and now visible is true. We know that visible is true, makes it red, and you can see the text is red. Now I'll click it, and now visible is false. And you could, the reason I'm showing you this is because you could just do anything. You could just do anything inside it that you can think of. Just make it so that the logic is in the code and it goes against it. And if you're like, I really wonder about the syntax because it's tricky, well, that's the reason that I made sure that you had Copilot so it could help you out. All right, so this is called Blazor, B-L-A-Z-O-R. B-L-A-Z-O-R, right? Was it blazor.com? I don't think so. B-L-A-Z-O-R. I think I just did a search and then clicked on the first one. Yeah. And so this is the location for all the documentation and how it's going to work. What's nice is this is cross-platform, works great on a Mac, works great, frankly, everywhere. And it works great in every browser. And honestly, it's up to you to write the correct logic of to support every browser, right? Because this is just standard HTML. Okay, let me show you this one last thing. So I'm back in Visual Studio Code. This is what you have when you pull down from the repository today, right? You're going to pull down from GitHub onto your local machine, and you're going to have the CS, the C# dev kit installed. That's the reason you'll see Solution Explorer and not just the name of the folder. And when you hit F5 to run it, and this is the F5 area, right? So when I hit F5 to run it, and I'm going to select Launch Blazor, and you could just barely see it, but it says HTTPS. You just have to trust me. You could either click here or you could hit F5. So I'll click here. You wait for it to build, it launches the browser, and I've given you a default of what the app game is going to look like, right? So it's pretty handy. And so now I can go in and I can say the very first one might be this one. And so now you can see that is switched to 0 because current turn was 0. And you can see I picked the right middle. And so now right middle is green. That's the one that you can play. And so now I can say, let's say X is going to be bottom left. And when I do that, you can see bottom left, right? Waiting to be played again. There is no great logic here. This is me just giving you a baseline to start with so that you can kind of pick it up and go. If you feel like this is too much work, listen, here's the way I want you to think about this. This is just helping you get started. In the project, right now, the app lead, that is the game lead, is Iris. And so we know that Richard has come up with the way the game's supposed to play. Iris is going to help build the application. Who else can help Iris build the application? Everybody, and you should all work together, obviously. That's the reason you pick tasks the way that you do. And but it makes it so that Iris gets started. So if you're like, hey, I want to get started, you need to just reach out to Iris. Iris, have you done anything yet? Can I help with this or that? And you should be able to see that as she makes changes to it, or as you make changes to it. I mean, this is not one person writing it. But as the changes are being made, let me say it that way. And let's just say there's extra logic, logic, then all of a sudden you can go in and you're like, I have these changes and I'm going to commit these changes back up to the main repository. And so now I could say I added a comment, which is silly, right? It's not a big deal. And then when I click commit, or I drop this down and say commit and immediately push it, or sync means pull and then push. So if I go ahead and do that, now when I go in, I'll go back to our repository and go to the code. You can see this repository, the last thing that happened to it was from me right here, Jerry Nixon. I added a comment. That's the one thing that I did. Now that's the overall um, uh, commit message, but it doesn't really tell you very much. Now, if I were to click on this, it would pull up just the file that changed, right? So that's pretty neat. Or I could drill into it. Let's see, what did I change? This is Razor. What file am I in? I am in git cell image, but no, the file is home Razor CS. Okay, so now I can go to source, game, home Razor pages, right? Because that's where it is, and there's home Razor CS, and you can see there's a comment for that, but there's no comment here because I didn't make a change to that file. Right? So that's nice. And as I go in here, I'll be like, ah, very nice. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, fine. That's pretty nice all the way around. And now you know. So this is how it works. Remember, as you're making changes locally, make sure they work, make sure everything is good, and then push those up to the server. And that's the way you want to do it. And we'll talk about branching so that we can work without clashing with each other's work moving forward. But this is the perfect way to get started. So hopefully this makes sense using the application so that you can start building out the game. This is a very simple little game that you can either use my logic or this is not the right demo. Let's see. There we go. You can either use my logic or not. That's completely up to you. And I just wanted to give you a place to get started. Now, later we'll talk about the function and how that works for ML. But the truth of the matter is we're too early to think about ML. Right now we need to talk about the game and getting it working. And then we'll have the model a little bit later. And so it's almost certainly going to be a decision tree model, to be honest. But that's fine. That's not that big of a deal. All right, so let's, where's the window that opened? I've got 4 monitors, so it's funny how this happens. And it is, where is the, oh gosh, it's open somewhere. Shift F5. I gotta stop it and then restart it. That's so funny. So moving forward, this is all you should need. You would just run it again. Okay, I gotta figure. I have like 6,000 browsers open, and I can't seem to find the one that has it that I'm trying to run here. I'll close this. Isn't this? I hope this happens to you guys too, right? Where you're like, oh man, what's going on? Because I mean, it happens to all of us. Um, is it here? No, this browser. Oh, I think that was the browser. All right, so let me rerun it now. And oh yeah, okay. So there it is. But this is important, right? So I'm going to close it real quick and just make this quick little point to you. So you might create multiple pages. You could just go right here and create a brand new page. And then, right, it's saying what kind of page do you want to create? Do you see I click this button and it brought up this menu. And I'll say I want a Razor page. There it is. There's a Razor page. And so when I select that, it's going to ask me for the path that it's going to run in. So let me just show you home instead. So right, so home is slash, and if I said Jerry, right? Now I'm going to run the application again, and I'll get it. And wait, now why is it working right there? I think the default is Jerry, and it takes me to Jerry. Okay, that is because there's only one. But if you were to create another one, you would intentionally create a page path that would cause you to have to go to it. And then you go up here, and you'd be like, okay, this slash Jerry, right? And it would go to the new page. Right, so that's the important part that as we add different pages, these will be pages like login pages, leaderboard pages. We don't want everything to be in one gigantic page. So you can create these, and this is the route that it will create for everyone. All right. Clearly something squirrely going on with that /Jerry. Was it still running? I'm not 100% sure, but just know that as we create new pages, each one of them is going to have its own unique route that it goes to. And so a little bit of a mystery there of why /Jerry didn't cause it to work. Excuse me. But nothing that we can't solve. I mean, after all, we're all engineers here, ready to solve problems, and so, and also nothing that our friend Copilot can't help us with, or Google.com. I mean, there's no doubt about it. All right, so this is just to get you started so you can see it. So what everything is, why logic exists, why the game exists, and why we're not looking at an API just yet. That's where the ML is going to be. All right, so that's all of the different pages in there. As you start reading about Blazor yourself, hopefully this will all start feeling familiar, like, oh, because of that, and then you got that, and then you got that. Very good. By the way, there are two types of Blazor. One runs on the server, one runs in the browser. We are only using the one that runs in the browser. I'll explain why later, but just know it's an important part. And we just don't have any place to host it is the reason. All right. And I've got no changes, nothing to commit, and nothing to push up. So that's really great. All right. Have a great week.